boy. I'm gonna be honest, I was not planning to make this video today. But here we are! Alright, chill time. If you like what I do, I would strongly ask that you check out the Patreon and the Discord. See, I could be using this time looking for a second job that would pay me money, because I have a cat that likes food, and I like food, and I like spending money on shit that I don't need, but I can't do that without money. But instead I chose to do this because I find this entertaining. So if you also find this entertaining, and you have money burning a hole in your wallet the size of a Mack truck, I would ask kindly that you check the Patreon out and throw some of that moolah my way. If you do, I'm going to start putting my patrons' names on the ends of the video when I start getting patrons. Speaking of the video, on to the fun part. Alright, so as you have probably heard by now, there was an interesting little article that came out about, I guess the best way to summarize it is supposedly Pjosted, the previous CEO and currently the head game designer of Arrowhead Studios, was invited to speak at the UN, or was asked a question by the UN or something along those lines. Now look, I'm just going to open this up here. As you can probably tell by the icon that I end up using with these videos, I am a huge fan of Helldivers. It is my favorite game. And it is basically, since it came out last year, the only games I have consistently played have been Helldivers 2 and Stellaris. Hi, kitty. So, just pointing that out. That said, I am going to do my best to be unbiased with this. If Arrowhead does something stupid, I'm going to hold them to it. I don't think that's going to apply here. And I want to kind of use this video to talk a bit about a topic that is very personal to me, a topic that to be perfectly honest, is one of the reasons why I decided to go ahead with this channel, and that is the topic of tribalism. Because I think that the Helldivers situation and the previous dramas with Helldivers especially, I can use to make a really good example of tribalism and my issues with it. Now, you might be wondering, though I don't really think you will be, but in case you are, you might be wondering, well, what is tribalism? Simply put, to use a dictionary definition, tribalism is the state or fact of being organized into a tribe. I know, mind-blowing, very, very, very revolutionary here. In political terms, tribalism tends to refer to when a group of people with a shared ideology form an ideological tribe and begin to essentially function with tribe mentality. Tribe mentality being you completely agree with the tribe and subscribe to the ideals of the tribe, or you are an enemy of the tribe. Everything needs to be done in benefit of the tribe and pushing the agendas of the tribe. This is essentially what woke politics, or SJW politics as they used to be called, that's essentially what that is. That was a form of far left tribalism. But in recent years especially, there has been a huge issue of tribalism on the right wing of things as well. There was a term back in like the early 2010s, right-wing SJW. It died out at the time because at the time right-wing ideology, as it were, was not the dominant ideology, so ideas like that got shot down. But I think it's time that we revisit that concept. And why am I saying this is important? Why am I bringing this up? Why is this important here? Well, because this situation, I believe personally, is very heavily dependent on tribalism, and especially right-wing tribalism. Pretty much every Helldivers issue after their community manager bullshit has been related to tribalism in some manner. So, yeah, so let's go ahead. I want to get into this article. We're actually going to read through it, and I'll pause it at times to discuss it as things go through. All right, so this article is by the PC Gamer. Now, just starting this off, I am aware of the PC Gamer's reputation here. I am not going to cite this as a accurate source. In fact, dare I say, a lot of the reasons why we're seeing the drama we are seeing right now is because PC Gamer has probably tried to manipulate this in a specific way. But they quote Peelstead, that's going to be the important parts. And since this is the only source on this topic right now, this is the source we have to go to. So, United Nations asks Helldivers 2 Studio Arrowhead if it give a talk on psychological manipulation, could we brainwash an entire community to fight for a fascist state? Would we be okay with that? Turns out, yeah. That's the part that people are freaked out about, because apparently, according to this article, this is a Peelstead quote. Now, I would just like to take a moment to point something out here about the Helldivers franchise as somebody who I was introduced through the second game. I've been playing since it first came out, but I have actually gone back and played the first game. I've looked into the lore that is there for the game. There is a lore outside of just whatever dumb shit the community does. And the thing about Helldivers as a franchise is it has been very consistent on being a parody. It is inspired by Starship Troopers, which I know a lot of people are falsely believing that Starship Troopers was supposed to be a commentary on fascism because what's his face, McGee, the German director that directed the movie, wanted to make the movie about that. Yeah, great. He didn't understand the book. He admitted he didn't read the book. Starship Troopers was not a commentary on fascist states. It was actually a piece of fiction that was supposed to be anti-communist. So the idea that Starship Troopers is fascist is just completely not true. Getting that out of the way. But Helldivers is not Starship Troopers. Helldivers, since day one, has been a parody and a commentary on two things. It was a parody or a parody commentary on Vietnam era Western policy and War on Terror era War on Terror. My bad. War on Terror era policies and politics. And the first game, it came out in 2015, so I would like to point something out here. A lot of the stuff that it's critiquing, I don't know if Arrowhead would agree with me on this politically, but this is just the state of the facts. They made the game around 2015, so they were working on it around at least between 2013, maybe 2010, but I probably most likely starting around 2012, 2013, came out in 2015. This would have been a critique on Obama-era policies heavily. That was the tail end of War on Terror. Obviously, it would be critiquing, Bush-era politics as well, and the politics of the Europe side of things as that was going on. So, just an understanding there. Helldivers has been a parody and a commentary on those eras of Western policy, specifically the concept of using essentially buzzwords, using terms like freedom and democracy and liberty to push authoritarian and totalitarian end goals and agendas, which is a real thing. That is what was happening. That's what we've been seeing, and until recently, that's a lot of what's been going on. Pushing for totalitarian socialist policies under the guise of defending our democracy. That's what it's a commentary on. It always has been. I know a lot of people will also try to go to the argument of, oh, yeah, Super Earth is totally the bad guy because they're fighting for their right to survive against these alien races. There's always been an undertone, at least to my personal understanding from playing the games, there has always been an undertone of, yeah, we are corrupt and messed up, we have a lot of problems, but we're not the worst thing out there. So to use the War on Terror, for example, there was corrupt policy and corrupt leaders that were involved in the engineering of the War on Terror. at the same time, it was better. At the same time, if we're going to talk about some sort of moral high ground, the U.S. had that over Al Qaeda and ISIS. So there has always been that undertone of, are we the bad guys? Kind of, but they're worse. So there is that. Nobody's saying Super Earth is the bad guys for defending themselves. They're the bad guys because of their policies that they implement on their own society. There is also the fact that if you know anything about the first game, you will know that the first Galactic War, which is the only reason that the quote-unquote political climate of the second game could occur, was caused when Super Earth started declaring war on everybody else. In the first game, the Illuminate were actually scared of humanity because we exploded onto the galactic scene through warfare and tried to push for peace. When humanity saw that they had technology that could potentially be used to destroy planets, and also that they declared war on the Illuminate. Again, the Illuminate wanted peace. The Terminids did not care about humanity at the time. They would have been fine with peaceful coexistence with their hive mind. Humanity declared war on them because they were a good resource, and let's be honest, bugs are ugly. The only one that was even an active threat in the first game was the cyborgs, because they were actually just a communist uprising. Now, whether or not you want to talk about those declarations of war being justified, that's a different topic for a different time. I will say, though, that I love my Super Earth, and I have not questioned it once. But understanding that this has always been a parody of these policies is important here. And I will kind of touch on this again later, but I wanted to establish this all now so that we're all on the same page going into this. All right. Players' eagerness to fight excuse me. I'm sorry. I am a bit drowsy, and at the same time, this article has some really bad spelling from what I've gathered, or not bad spelling, but like bad grammar, like with shit like this. Oh god. But anyways, players' eagerness in the fight for Super Earth begs the question: are we the baddies? Yesn't. If you've played Helldivers 2 for more than about 15 seconds, you're probably well acquainted with the game's wry sense of humor. A la Starship Troopers, the game sees players dying in droves as disposable soldiers in the name of a theoretical democratic utopia. Not that they'd ever see it, that they're all too busy getting torn apart by giant bugs and landing supply drops on each other's heads. I mean, yeah, that's basically the state of the game. I know there's a lot of people saying, "Oh no, the Helldivers aren't supposed to be," and this will come up later. It's like the Helldivers aren't supposed to be disposable grunts; they're the elite units. Yeah, lore-wise, they're the elite units. But yeah, no, that's kind of the whole point. We'll get into that more with the actual video. But anyways. In a talk at 2025's Game Developers Conference titled Helldivers 2 Capturing Lightning in a Bottle, Arrowhead CEO Johan Pilestead reiterated for anyone out of the loop that yes, the game is meant to be ironic, and the fight for Super Earth was always meant to paint players as a dispendable henchman. What is Helldivers 2 fundamentally? It would probably be fun to play a co-op action shooter where you're put in the shoes of the evil side grunts of pop culture. How many seconds would you be available to survive? Now, a lot of people are bitching about that. A lot of people are saying, no, that's not what it is at all. Yes, it is. Arrowhead and Pilestead have been very open about that since day one of this. That this is... I remember a talk that he specifically gave where he mentioned a scene in Star Wars where a bunch of stormtroopers were trying to come out and shoot Luke and what's his face? Was it Solo? I don't know. I'm not a Star Wars fan, but the guy with the funny Millennium Falcon thing. And just the first stormtrooper just immediately gets killed. And Pilestead said that one of the things about Helldivers 2 is supposed to be okay, do you think you could do better? A big part of this game is you are expendable, you are going to die a lot, you literally get replaced. You don't respawn, you get replaced. So that is the theme of the game. You are an elite unit that is about as expendable as a cheeseburger wrapper. Of course, you might start to wonder how fun it'll actually be once you consider the implications of dressing players up in fascist uniforms and calling them to arms under the banner of an imperial state to die, and die again in the name of democracy. We ask ourselves, could we brainwash an entire community to fight for a fascist state? Would we be okay with that? And turns out, yeah, actually, Pielstead said in his talk. Okay, this is what's pissing people off. Why? Genuinely, why is this what's pissing people off? Because it seems to me if that's pissing you off, because what's pissing people off is, could we brainwash an entire community? I mean, technically, yeah. I mean, yeah, no, I'm not saying that people playing Helldivers have been brainwashed into anything. I don't think Pielstead is either. So right before I started this video, I actually looked through Pielstead's Twitter to see if he had said anything on this yet. He hasn't posted since last year. Not surprised. The guy said he's going on a pretty big break to spend more time with his family. But there is one thing to note about Pielstead, and that is his sense of humor. And this very much lines up with his sense of humor to say, could we brainwash the entire community? Yeah, that's how he talks. That's just how he talks, for one. But also, let's get into a little more commentary, a little more, political parody commentary aspect of Helldivers. Helldivers is, again, a parody commentary on Vietnam and War on Terror era politics, which are widely viewed, and I think for the most part justifiably so, as eras of, especially in the U.S. politics, as corruption and wars for money. And while, especially with the Vietnam War, it's a little more of a complicated gray area, there is undeniable fact that those things were there. And then you get into the Obama era where we're drones striking, American citizens in other countries and shit like that. So there is something to criticize here. Like the game is getting at something. I think a better way to word this instead, in my personal understanding, I'm not Pielstead. I don't know what's going on in his brain, but I would say a better way to put that is, to an extent, part of what Helldivers 2 is being a parody of, or is parodying and being a commentary of, is why are people so willing to throw themselves and support totalitarian regimes? Now you might be saying, but 9 lives, nobody would do that, right? Well, look at history for that, I'd say. Hitler did not take power. He took power in the National Socialist Party, yes, but he was voted into power. Mussolini was voted into power. A lot of these communist dictators, even the ones who were brought in through uprisings, that's the key, uprisings. They were put into power by people who were willing to jump into their regime. They were willing to support these people. And funny enough, in the case of Mussolini, he was voted out of power too. And while a lot of times as these regimes progressed on, people started to see the true colors and they lost support, but dictatorial and totalitarian and authoritarian regimes come into power through mass support. So yeah, he's onto something here. If he's trying to say that this game is a commentary in part on that, then he is definitely onto something. because that has historically been how these regimes have kept power. People have been, in many cases, hyped to support them. They were popular when they came to power. That's part of how they came to power. And if, again, the game is a parody commentary, always has been. It's avoided real world politics. You're never going to see, at least unless some really wacky people get in power over at Arrowhead, but as long as the people making the game right now are in charge, they've stuck to the no putting real world politics in there. You're not going to see any pride flags, you're not going to see any MAGA hats, you're not going to see anything like that. It has contained everything within its own in-universe politics, but it's still a commentary on real world stuff. And I think that, yeah, that's actually a legit thing to kind of explore, is why were people so willing to throw themselves at these regimes? And I mean, I see no issue with doing that with a game. I remember not even 5 years ago, like 2 years ago, I want to say, where people were saying if you want to put politics in your games, this is how you do it, subtly and not putting real world politics into it. But now we're complaining about them doing just that. But this really doesn't seem like it's meant to be an insult either. Like I said, this just seems to be Peelstead's more kind of crude humor way of saying things, and I fail to see why this is upsetting people. If you can give a good reason, if you can explain to me why this is upsetting and actually kind of break it down for me, go ahead, do it in the comments or join the Discord. I would actually be curious to see that. But personally, I can see, at least I think I see what he's getting at here, and nowhere does this scream, we hate our player base. Anyways, moving on. But it wasn't just players whose heads were turned by Helldivers' sardonic spin on Imperial warfare. They also garnered the attention of a little organization you might have heard of before called the United Nations of Jackasses. I don't like the UN. Okay, the UN, when I hear the UN wanted them to comment on this or ask them about this, what I hear is the UN wanted to see if they should be concerned about this or if they can use this. The reason I say that is because the UN has historically been anti-video game. Like, they have not liked video games. So there's that. They've been historically anti-video game. And a lot of the politics that Helldivers is a commentary on are United Nations politics. It's agendas that the UN pushes. So I would not, when I hear that when they reached out to Arrowhead, I do not hear, oh, Arrowhead hates you and they're going to go tell the UN about it. I hear the UN is trying to gauge if they want to see if they can weaponize this or if they should be against it. So anyways, continuing on here, we got another quote. I believe this is Peelstead again. Actually, we got a message from the UN asking if we want to talk in some form about psychological defense against manipulation. Oh, hold on a minute there. If we want to talk in some form about psychological defense against manipulation. Now, credit where credit is due. There is a big concern with this whole thing that I actually completely share. Why is the UN asking a game developer about this? That genuinely is kind of concerning, but at the same time, it's the UN reaching out to Peelstead, not the other way around. But that is something that kind of sets off some alarm bells for me. But it's, at the same time, in some form about psychological defense against manipulation. I don't trust the UN any farther than I can throw it, and surprise, surprise, I can't throw the UN. It's very large, very large. Lots of infrastructure, lots of people. I can't throw that. So this, to me, when the UN says that, sounds more like, how can we use propaganda to make sure people have our opinions on these things? But that doesn't mean that's what Pielstead means. I don't know. It's weird. I will just say that it's weird, but this also is not, hey, talk about how you brainwash the Helldivers community. This is, hey, how could we avoid this? You've made a game commenting on how this happens. How could we avoid this? Which, if it wasn't the UN, is a genuine question. It's just, I don't trust the UN. This might all sound like the game is getting a little too real, but he said the key was in finding the right tone and using the imagery in an almost educational way. We do it all in fun and good spirits, and we actually try to get people to recognize the science of what is a totalitarian state. If you start wearing the same uniform as everybody else and do salutes constantly, you might be in a totalitarian regime. That alone, this comment right here, should put this whole fucking drama to bed. But that's not how people work. And this is gonna get into the whole tribalism thing. But I'm gonna save it more to after the article, but I'll touch on it a bit here. This comment right here shows that this is not a we hate the community, oh, we brainwash the community. This just confirms this game is a parody that is using this symbolism as more of a warning sign, like to show you what it looks like, to point it out. This is not saying, see, the Helldivers community is stupid and dumb and we brainwashed them to fight for this thing. This is, we have a game and we are using this to show people when the Nazis are coming back. I know, Nazis overused, but you get the idea. This is a game that is being used to point out what these things start to appear like in a satirical and all in fun and good spirits manner. Pielstead is not saying, hey, we've manipulated you. He's not saying, hey, we hate you. He's just saying, we made a game that comments on this and is designed to point this stuff out within its own isolated comedic manner. In other words, it's a parody commentary. That sentence alone, this should shoot down any of this whole argument. This right here. We do it all in fun and good spirits, and we actually try to get people to recognize the science of what is a totalitarian state. That should be the end of this, because he is now admitting exactly what he meant with, we asked ourselves, could we brainwash an entire community to fight for a fascist state? Would they be okay with that? Maybe that's bad wording. You could make the argument that's a bad way to put it, but that should clear it up of what's actually going on. It's unclear if Arrowhead actually had any further discussions with the UN, but it speaks volumes to the game's far-reaching influence and evocative riffs on fascist propaganda. Games are not unfamiliar with these sorts of discussions, but rarely does one invite them so bluntly. I have nothing to disagree with there, because this is pretty accurate. I would like to point out that these people saying that, Pielstead and Arrowhead got invited to speak at the UN. That is false. That is just false. The UN reached out to Pielstead through private forms of communication, asking this question, and he gave them an answer, and that's about as far as it went. So that just shows how much this is being blown out of proportions. To drive the point home and prevent Helldivers 2 from getting too depressing, Arrowhead pulled on the shiny, patriotic aesthetics of the US, the EU, and the United Nations itself, as well as the mantras of regimes like Nazi Germany and North Korea. It creates pleasing aesthetics, Pielstead noted, because there's something totalitarian regimes are really good at, pleasing aesthetics. Yeah, Hugo Boss. Literally, Hugo Boss is a meme. I'll just double check that that's actually the guy I'm thinking of, because I'm terrible with names. Yeah, Hugo Boss. Yeah.
You observe democracy well.
That's not wrong. This is not wrong. But it's not wrong. I don't know how else to put it. Yeah, totalitarian regimes like to make things look fancy, and that's not just a Nazi thing. Yeah, the meme is Hugo Boss. The Nazis, yeah, they were terrible, horrible dictators, but at least they did it in style. It's not just them. The Soviets tried it too. Look at the Chinese. Their military is very flashy. They make their military equipment look really super badass and cool. The North Koreans try and do it too. It's like, yeah, totalitarian regimes put a lot into their aesthetics. That's not wrong. And if you want to make it look pleasing in a day, if you're trying to make a totalitarian regime in a day and age where we have basically been, politics and all the technicalities aside, we are several generations of hating totalitarianism and being told why totalitarianism is bad. So how do you evoke the same idea of totalitarian regimes look pleasing, and how do you give them that same aesthetic in a way that is not just the meme of at least they were bad but they looked good while they were doing it, but instead in the, yeah, this looks cool, this looks, how do you make it tug at a person? How do you make a person almost want to agree with it? Well, right now, yeah, you would use the aesthetics of the US, the EU, and the UN itself. Make it look like the good guy to you. Yeah, I get what he's doing. I get what they're doing. That's how you do it. He's not wrong. I don't know how else to put it. He's not wrong. What's the joke? The bad guys always look the coolest. It's hard to imagine Helldivers without its satirical stormtroopers in every corner of the galaxy, and players have certainly responded to the game's call to arms with eager roleplay, joking and otherwise. Combine that with Helldivers 2's novel approach to live service, wherein games developing war constantly finds new ways to seem comically hopeless, and it seems like Arrowhead is better at indoctrinating loyal soldiers than one might expect. Though given Magica's bewildering Vietnam expansion, maybe we should have all seen this coming. Yeah, I mean, the indoctrinating loyal soldiers, obviously okay, they're playing off the joke. They're just playing off the joke of Helldivers, of, we all go in there and we blindly throw ourselves at the problem for managed democracy. And then we shoot each other if we say something minorly undemocratic and all that dumb shit. It's just yeah, they're playing off the joke. That's the joke of the game. Everybody knows it. We all know the joke. We're all in on the joke. That's the joke. Like, genuinely, as somebody who's been playing Helldivers for over a year now, there's not a single thing in this that surprises me other than the UN reached out to Pielstead. The rest of this, like, anybody who gave a shit about Helldivers for more than 2 minutes or more than when it was relevant to culture war bullshit would know all of this. So, with this out of the way, I want to take a minute to talk about tribalism. Because I mentioned that's kind of what I wanted to use this topic to discuss a little bit, and how I feel it is relevant to this. To be perfectly honest, I think the different dramas with Helldivers in general are a pretty good example of tribalism, because it's the most straightforward I've seen in years. And I'm for any political or moral or any sort of worldview, we have just spent the time to read through this article, to read what it said, to read what was quoted, and read what it's talking about, and to understand what it's actually saying. But if you look through the Steam forums here, or if you look at a lot of the people talking about this, they have instead resorted to a lot of generalizations. A lot of them have basically said false information. For example, the claim that Arrowhead was invited to speak at the UN, which they were not, and things along this line. And why would this be? Well, it's because of tribalism. We live in a very divisive time in history where the concept of it's an us or them mentality has really taken root everywhere. And so there has come this phenomenon of where if something does not agree with a certain viewpoint 100%, people want to destroy it, people want to tear it down. If it is not with them, it is against them. If it is not with the tribe, it is against the tribe. And that's where this comes into play. And and like I said, I have a big concern with this. This is actually a big part of why I started this channel, was because I started to see this happening on the political right, on the side and set of worldviews and morals that I would say I personally align with. I am a more right-leaning individual. I am a more conservative individual. I am a Christian individual. And for years and years and years, ever since the beginning of the culture war as we see it in this day and age, I have taken issue with these concepts of cancel culture and refusal to listen to the opposing side and hear them out and understand what they're saying, and attempting to burn them down, to burn their side, to destroy their side if it is not with the political agenda, it's against them. For over a decade now, I have taken issue with that. I have criticized that. That was one of my biggest problems with left-leaning ideologies. And now I'm starting to see it happen on the right. I've seen it become far more prominent. When this all started, when the culture war all started and whatnot, the conservative, the right side, the Christian side of things was all more about, protecting things that it saw as good, trying to preserve a moral structure. And there was this concept of it is better to do the right thing than to just do whatever it takes, essentially. And as time progressed, that concept went away. It has now become so much more about winning. People are much more willing to resort to these same tactics that we criticized the left for a very long time. And so I'm sitting here like I didn't put up with it with the left, with the woke ideologies and SJWs. Why would I put up with these things on my own side if that was my biggest criticisms? Was this behavior, these mentalities, and the problems they caused. And I know a lot of people now will try to say things like, well, this is what you have to do to stop them. It needs to be about winning. You're limiting yourself by trying to play fair. And to anybody who agrees with that line of thinking of we need to just do whatever it takes to win, screw morality, screw common grounds, it's just burn it. If it doesn't agree with the tribe, burn it. What I have to say to those people is that will not be what wins you the culture at the end of the day. Culture war and the concept of culture war is honestly stupid, because all it is just a pendulum swinging from one extreme to the other over time. It happens throughout human history all the time. In case you want a good example, we are currently in an era of liberal democracies being widely seen as the dominant form of government system to the point where even more authoritarian government systems are trying to imitate it. Before this, it was strict monarchies and their own structures, and everybody had a monarchy, and that was the moral structure. And before that was republics and democracies again. Before the Middle Ages, you know? It's a stupid thing. It's a pendulum swinging. But what I will say is not stupid about it is, trying to preserve good morals and good ideology. And as long as that is your end goal, to preserve what is good in a society, to preserve a good structure that is beneficial to the society you live in, that's not stupid. But when it just becomes about winning and snuffing out anything that disagrees with you, then you are just as bad as those you sought to go after. And to the people who are trying to do that on both sides, you will not be the ones to rebuild society. You will not be the ones to rebuild culture, just like you were not the ones who took it away. The people who will in the end decide what the culture becomes is going to be the people in the middle. The average person who is going to be most affected by it. And these ideas of starting these stupid dramas and trying to force this tribalist mentality, trying to force people to pick a camp or burn, essentially. If you do not 100% agree with the one camp, you must be with the other camp and must be destroyed. Metaphorically speaking. That side will not be the one that wins. That will eventually be the one that loses. Because what's going to win at the end of the day is going to be the one that benefits the average everyday person. Helldivers, I believe, is the best example of this because it has been where it has been the most straightforward. When the game first came out, it was a bunch of leftist tribalism. Try to tear down and destroy the game. Because it did not... because Helldivers refused to put their far-left communist agenda into the game. Now the right is doing the same thing for similar reasons. And we have forgotten the art of being able to find common ground and accept that we will disagree. This country, the United States, was not built on tribalism. It was built on a distinct lack of it, on an idea of there needs to be common ground found to unite and work together under a moral structure. And that has been completely lost. And as tribalism takes root, it will become worse. I do not like tribalism on any side, and I very much strongly believe in holding my own side of things accountable. So I'm going to call out anybody who does this. Tribalism is a destructive ideology. It is a destructive thing that is inherently bad for any society, for any culture. Because essentially what it does is it forces a radicalized divide in society. You are not allowed to find common ground with your fellow man. You are not allowed to find things you can share. You are forced into a camp that is in a constant ideological war that you must agree with 100% of the time. It does not allow for criticism. It does not allow for consideration of other ideology. It is the tribe's way or the highway. And with this, we are starting to see a rise in things like stupid things being blown out of proportion, or things being misinterpreted, or just straight up lied about to push agendas. We're seeing things like people claiming, see, this is actually super right-wing, or see, this is actually super woke, when in reality it's neither. It's just trying to be a fun piece of media. Tribalism leads to a point where you can't have this escapism from reality. This stuff is always being crammed down your throat constantly. you can't enjoy something. I enjoy Helldivers because it is removed from all this stuff that is constantly being shoved in my face, but it's hard to enjoy that when people of political ideologies and agendas who actively don't even have an interest in this game outside of its social and political effects try to cram their ideologies in my face. One minute they prop up the game and praise it, the next they want to tear it down and destroy it. It's stupid. You are not allowed to think independently. As somebody of my generation, I bring up things, for example, issues with the economy, for example, and I will be immediately labeled a communist because I state things that somebody born in the 60s didn't have to deal with, doesn't fully see, and is in a field, like, for example, getting a job or finding a house. It's in a field that they haven't had to worry about for well over 30 years. But they have subscribed to their tribe being their generation and the way things were, and they will attack anything that does not match up with it. I choose to play Helldivers because I enjoy the game. If it does something that one person with even a little bit of a following doesn't like, I am suddenly labeled a corporate shill or a leftist or part of the problem, and this is all stupid because this is stopping us from being able to think critically. Because you must subscribe to the ideologies of the tribe. And it doesn't help that a lot of these people who are pushing these tribalist ideals, their following are people who can't think critically. Tribalism takes root very easily when there's a lack of critical thinking. And so a lot of these people who are watching these social commentators and are, siding with this stuff and, parroting the things that these commentators say are not trying to think about it for themselves and gather information for themselves. They are looking to be told what to think because they cannot think critically. And so they mindlessly follow whatever the cult of personality, whatever the tribe they subscribe to says, and they can't question it. If we go back to my video with Nellup, I brought up how these people will just mindlessly latch onto this stuff and consume it. It becomes their personality. The same thing happens with tribalism. You lack critical thinking, you lack the ability to question things, essentially, and this is what happens. This is why I encourage people to correct me, or to disagree with me, or even argue with me. Because I am a strong believer in critical thinking. I am a strong believer in finding common ground and hearing other people's ideas and seeing if there's something I might have wrong. Because that's what builds a society. That's what builds a unified society. That is what my country was built on, finding common ground. And I think if any of this is worth fighting for, that needs to be kept in place. It's not about just winning, because you will eventually become the same problem that you were once fighting against, and I don't support that. I don't support tribalism in any form. It is a bad thing. As I have just shown here, I've read this article in full, beginning to end. I have talked about what was being said, what was actually being said, and came to the conclusion of what it was getting at. You will not see this. There are people that actually, you will see people who have figured this out. Thank goodness, at least it seems the Helldivers community has some smart people left in it. But you will see a lot of people who didn't do this, who didn't bother to do their research. They didn't bother to question things. They just believed what they were told and pushed a narrative. And essentially that's why tribalism is bad. you lose the ability to question and find the truth and replace it with mindless loyalty to an individual or an ideology that could be severely flawed, but you don't dare question it because that is the tribe, and obviously you want to push the agenda of your tribe, right? And if you do ever get the cojones to question it, you are immediately seen as an enemy. I have lost friends over tribalist behavior because I refuse to subscribe to a mindless ideology because somebody who is based or has got the right ideas said it. So yeah, this video, this is one I've been kind of wanting to do for a while, but I didn't expect to be doing it so soon. But it is one that I feel is very important. And if out of any of my content, if there's only one video you watch, I want it to be this one. Do not fall for the tribalist trap. Do not fall for this stupid, mindless cult of agenda, cult of personality, whatever you want to call it. Question agendas. Do your own research. Figure out the truth. And most importantly, look for common ground. You share a planet with these people. You share a country with these people. And if you want to defend things that you think are good in society, you need to find common ground. You need to be able to find a way to bridge those gaps and work with people you disagree with. Because the tribes are not going to be what wins. They are just going to be what destroys and what is to be destroyed. Thank you for watching this video. I asked, once again, that you give the Patreon and the Discord a check out, and I also asked that you go ahead and subscribe. You know, I have 10 subscribers, and I get 7 times the views. So, I would appreciate if you give a subscription, make sure you like, and again, if you got money and you think I'm worth money, I love money. Yeah, you have yourselves a